So there were no harmonics sounding at all. You couldn't tell the difference between the trumpet and the lady's voice. They sounded absolutely identical. Well, good morning, and welcome back to my living room, to my piano once again. This morning we're going to be sharing a tutorial with you, and we're going to be talking about Overtone series. I know that most of you probably heard about the Overtone series, but you might not be real familiar with it. It's actually a musical series of notes. This is kind of a crude sketch, I apologize for that, but you'll see a series of notes, starting with C, and then the next octave C, and G, and the next C, and then E, G. And you'll notice they get closer and closer together, but they start out with the octave interval. C to C. The next interval would be a fifth. The next would be a fourth, major third, minor third. And when you get to this one, the B flat is kind of in between B natural and B flat. Then we have another C and a D, E, F, G, F also being slightly off, but mathematically you'll understand why that is the truth. And of course the Overtone series goes on above that, but that gets out of the range of our hearing and certainly beyond the notes that we're familiar with when we write music. But anyhow, that is the Overtone series. And if it were true, let's just assume this low C vibrates at 100 times per second. The next note would be 200. The G would be 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, and so forth up the scale. And that's why it just happens out that when you get to the seventh one, it's sort of between a B flat and a B natural. But the rest of them are all multiples of what we call the fundamental. The fundamental in the Overtone series is the bottom note, the primary note. And if you'll notice that a string vibrates, this is one end of the string, the other end, and you can see this line here, that's called the fundamental. And so it's the fundamental, first overtone, second, so forth. But we also refer to them as harmonics. And I like that better because we consider this first one the first harmonic, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. And you'll notice that 1, 2, 3, the fourth, fifth, and sixth form a major chord. And while you think that this string is vibrating in one segment, what you're not aware of, if we were able to freeze that in time, you will notice also that same string is dividing into two parts, and that would be considered the second harmonic. And if you follow this line, you'll notice it's dividing into three segments, and that would be considered the third harmonic. And so a string, when it's vibrating, is very complex. If you could freeze it, you'd be able to count all of those. I've exaggerated that because the string isn't going to vibrate with that much amplitude. It's actually going to be, you wouldn't even barely see it, but you can see it vibrating. You just don't see those subdivisions. I'm going to play a tone for you. How many notes? How many tones are you hearing when I play that note? Well, most of you would say, looks like you're playing just one. Well, it's not quite the case, because these overtones, because of sympathetic vibrations, we probably ought to identify what they are. When a certain sound is generating vibrations, and then all of a sudden, something a distance away, let's say it's a window pane, and a truck comes up the street. And as he's coming up the street, the revolutions of the engine keep increasing, and suddenly the number of vibrations coming from his muffler happen to match the natural frequency of a window pane. It would have to be a pretty loose window pane. But all of a sudden, you get sympathetic vibrations. They're vibrating in sympathy with each other. It's a pretty good word for it. So, the same is true in a piano. So when you see or you hear a string vibrating, what you're not really aware of is they're actually sympathetic vibrations given off by that fundamental tone. So you aren't hearing just one note. You're hearing 2, 3, 4, 5, on up to 7. The thing is, each of those harmonics is less intense, so eventually they just kind of disappear. But we're going to see if we can pick up with the camera, and if you can bring it in tight, because I want you to be able to see if you can pick up this frequency. When I push these 3 notes down, I push them down very silently because I want the dampers to come up. And now these strings are free to vibrate if they want to. And they're only going to vibrate if they happen to be notes in that harmonic series. So let's listen real close and see if you can hear any of these 3 notes. Did you hear the note stop? The one that I heard particularly was the E. Let's see if you can hear the C. Pardon? That's kind of dim. How about the G? That's even hard from where I'm sitting. But the E. That's the note you're hearing, right? Now, if I played 3 notes a half step down, those frequencies are not going to be a part of the frequency series of this particular harmonic series. Remember, they're all multiples of the fundamental. So only strings that would be 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700 are free to vibrate. But these are going to be something like 100, 200, 300, 400, probably going to be 390, and instead of 500, it's probably going to be 490 or 495 or something like that. So you won't hear anything happen. The dampers are now up on these 3 notes. It's quiet because they don't match that particular frequency. So it's a very interesting thing. I don't know if you're familiar with the name Leonard Bernstein. He was director of, I think it might have been either the Boston Philharmonic, or maybe it was the New York Philharmonic. In any case, he was a great teacher. He understood concepts like this very well, and he illustrated and talked about them in a way that any layman really could pretty well understand. And so he explained how it is that you can hear all these overtones, and you're not realizing, but they're actually part of the composite sound that you're hearing. And if you look at these lines down here, they represent the relative intensity or loudness of each of the overtones. So there's the fundamental. and that's this frequency. And let's pretend it's 100. The next one, this is the second harmonic. It's a little bit softer. And then the third, and notice how they come down rather gently. There might be a stronger overtone in there. This happens to be representing the sound of a flute because the overtones come down in their intensity at a very gradual, smooth pace. And that's what makes a flute sound like a flute. You may have wondered if the overtones are the same for a flute and a clarinet. They're the very same frequencies if they're playing the same fundamental note. The difference is that in a clarinet, it just happens that clarinets are designed in such a way that they accent the third harmonic, as you can see, and they accent some others along the line. And that's what makes the difference between a flute and a clarinet sound. Let's take a look at the piano overtones. Oh, look at that. The fifth overtone. Notice how much stronger the piano overtone is, or harmonic. The fifth being stronger than, in this graph it's showing the same intensity as the fundamental. It's not quite the case. This is kind of a crude drawing, but you'd understand now why when I play that note, we hear 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the fifth harmonic. And that's the one that was jumping out at us when we did that little experiment just a little while ago. Well, you might be wondering, what would happen if we could filter out these frequencies? Leonard Bernstein went into a studio laboratory, and he decided to do a little experiment. And so he recorded a lady's voice and a trumpet, quite different in sonority, obviously. And he went into this laboratory and he said, I'd like you to filter out these overtones. So one at a time, he would filter out the 12th, the 11th, the 10th, the 9th, the 8th, the 7th of the trumpet and of the lady's voice. And each time he filtered out one of the harmonics, the lady's voice and the trumpet began to sound very similar. And by the time he had filtered out everything except the fundamental, of course, so there were no harmonics sounding at all. You couldn't tell the difference between the trumpet and the lady's voice. They sounded absolutely identical. An interesting phenomenon. And so it proves to us that the harmonic series was given to us in nature. It wasn't that all of a sudden we decided to create music and that would be a nice sound. How about if we base all of our music on the major chord? Might be also interesting to you, and I got to thinking about this one day when we built a musical keyboard with our class, and we started pulling car horns out of various vehicles. So as the car would go by and I'd hear a horn honk, I'd listen, and every car, if the horns were working, had two horns. The interesting thing, it was always, notice the sympathetic vibrations given off by the keys that my elbow's holding down. Anyhow, it's not accidental that the car horns are tuned to major thirds, because that's a very pleasant sound. Fact is, I noticed that Cadillacs, at least back years ago, when I was doing my little construction project with a keyboard in my car, I noticed they had three notes, and they were tuned to the 4th, 5th, and 6th harmonics in the overtone series. Fact is, as I've listened to some trains going down the road, I'll hear that many tones, 4 or 5. Does that sound kind of like the sound of a, probably down in this octave. Listen to it next time a locomotive comes by, and you realize that this harmonic series is very pleasant. The other thing I noticed when I was in London one time, the frequencies given off by their emergency vehicles were very out of tune. And I think the whole purpose of that, it got people's attention and let them know that there's a problem. Either you're going too fast or there's an accident ahead that you need to be aware of. Well, you might wonder why we're going through this routine about overtones. Is that something I'll ever need as a musician? As a matter of fact, one of the tutorials that we're going to be doing is a tutorial that has to do with voicing and how you voice the various notes of a chord when you're playing. So we're going to cover that down the line, and you'll find as time goes on, your awareness of the overtone series will increase, and you'll discover it in nature and say, I recognize that. I remember the day we talked about the overtone series. So we hope that if you're enjoying this particular kind of discussion, we hope that you will like us and subscribe. And really, if you want to jot down some notes, make some comments, we read them all. Thanks, and we'll see you around another bend in the road.